Welcome to the Bench Report. You know, we always talk about those big topics that are being debated on the benches of the UK Parliament. We're really all about making politics, more accountable, more accessible, and we focus on issues that really impact all of us.
Yeah, I think that's really key. We often think about politics as this distant thing that doesn't really touch our everyday lives, but
It does. It does. At the end of the day, politics is everyone's business, and it's affecting us all personally and professionally.
absolutely, couldn't agree more.
So for today's deep dive, we're going to look at something you sent to us, and it's the second reading of the Rare Cancers Bill.
This is a really powerful bill.
It is, and the discussion in Parliament was incredibly moving. I mean, there were personal stories shared. It really underscored a need for some serious change in how we approach rare cancers.
Yeah, I think what really struck me when I was going through the source material was the sheer passion and the urgency in the MPs' voices.
For sure. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack all of that. We're going to look at the key arguments, the personal stories that were shared, and of course, the specific measures that are actually proposed in the bill itself.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we need to understand what this bill could mean for patients and their families.
Right, exactly.
And one of the things that we're going to kind of pull apart is this idea of rare.
Right.
Because rare, as we'll see, can be a very misleading term.
Yeah. Like when you hear rare, you think, 1 in a million.
Yeah.
But these cancers actually make up a pretty significant portion of all cancer diagnoses and even deaths here in the UK.
Exactly. So let's jump right in.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so Dr. Scott Arthur, the Labour MP for Edinburgh Southwest, he's the one who introduced this bill.
Okay.
And he actually highlighted this point about the misleading nature of rare.
Okay.
He said that rare and less common cancers account for 47% of all UK cancer diagnoses. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's around 180,000 cases every single year. So while individually, yeah, these cancers might be statistically rare,
Yeah.
but collectively, they're anything but uncommon.
That's a really important distinction.
It is. It really is, because it means that we can't treat this as a niche issue.
Right.
It's something that affects a huge swath of the population.
Right. Nearly half
Exactly.
of all cancer diagnoses. Wow.
So, it makes you think, are we doing enough? Are we putting enough resources, enough focus on this particular area?
And the debate, as I mentioned, there were so many personal stories that were shared by the MPs. I mean, Dr. Arthur actually started by sharing a really, really heartbreaking story.
Yeah, it was about a 4-year-old girl named Tilly in his constituency
Right.
who tragically passed away from stage 4 neuroblastoma.
Ah.
And it was just a year after her first symptoms appeared, and she'd gone through extensive treatment. But, what was particularly moving is that Tilly's father, Jonathan, was actually present in the gallery as Dr. Arthur was speaking.
Oh my gosh.
And you could just feel the weight of that story.
Yeah.
And the impact it had on everyone present.
It must have been so impactful. And I know Dr. Arthur used the word glacial to describe the pace of new treatment development, which really, really just hits you. I mean, glacial when you're talking about a child and this kind of diagnosis, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. It paints this picture of this slow, agonizing process.
Yeah.
Where time is just slipping away.
And for families facing these rare and often aggressive cancers, time is absolutely critical.
It's everything.
It's everything. And so that's why it's so frustrating and it feels unjust when research and treatment development just isn't keeping pace.
Right. And that really feeds into this sense of urgency and injustice that permeated the entire debate. Because the MPs kept saying over and over again that having a rare cancer should not mean that you have a lower chance of survival.
Yeah.
It shouldn't mean that you have less access to these medical breakthroughs or delayed diagnoses.
Right, right.
So it really comes down to this fundamental principle of equity in healthcare. Like, why should the statistical rarity of a disease dictate the level of research attention it receives?
Yeah. I mean, everybody deserves a chance.
Exactly.
And the same level of care. And when you look at survival rates and access to clinical trials, we've got some stats that were shared by Dr. Arthur that were they were pretty shocking, actually. I know he mentioned that patients with rare cancers are 17% less likely to survive.
Yeah.
Compared to those with more common cancers, that's a big gap.
That's a significant gap.
Yeah, that's huge.
And, it's not just because of the nature of the diseases themselves.
Right.
It's because there's historically been less research.
Yeah.
There's been less funding.
Right.
So the development of effective treatments has been slower.
So it's like this kind of negative spiral.
It's exactly. It feeds on itself. And then when you look at access to clinical trials, which are often the most cutting edge, when you're looking at new therapies, the situation's even worse.
Right.
There's data from Cancer 52. It's a collaborative group focused on rare and less common cancers. And they said that in 2024, 82% of patients with rare and less common cancers, they weren't even offered a clinical trial.
Oh, my God.
So they're being denied access to these potentially life-saving treatments.
Yeah, the word denied it's kind of a harsh word.
It is, but,
And it is.
it's the reality. And Dr. Arthur shared another story from his constituency to highlight this need for more innovative thinking when it comes to treating rare diseases.
Okay.
He talked about Kira, a young woman who's been living with neuroblastoma since she was 10. And her case really illustrated this potential of drug repurposing.
Yeah.
Where you have existing drugs that were developed for one condition, but they're found to be effective against another.
Right.
So in Kira's case, she's actually benefited from a lung cancer drug, which is not typically used for neuroblastoma.
Right.
But it's played a vital role in her ongoing survival.
So that's good news.
It's amazing. It's a really powerful example. But then Dane Siobhan McDonough, she brought up a really valid point about how effective we are in pursuing these repurposing opportunities.
Okay.
She questioned the impact of the NHS Drug Repurposing Office.
Right.
Because she noted that it's only successfully repurposed one drug, and that was for breast cancer.
Okay.
So her point is, okay, this is a great idea.
Yeah.
But is the current infrastructure actually working efficiently enough?
Yeah. So it's like we have the idea, but not necessarily the follow-through.
Exactly.
To make sure it's actually benefiting as many people as it could.
Yeah, exactly. Because there are potentially so many other patients out there.
Right.
Who could benefit from this approach.
Right.
But they're not.
And then we also saw the debate kind of shift to this issue of delayed diagnosis.
Yeah.
Which is something that really came up as a critical issue. And, Mrs. Emma Lewell-Buck shared a really concerning case from her constituency about Steph, a 29-year-old who was ultimately diagnosed with grade 4 glioblastoma.
Oh, wow.
But it was only after months of being treated for migraines.
Right.
And so her concerns were initially dismissed. And this just highlights how this unfamiliarity with rare disease symptoms, it can lead to these really critical delays in diagnosis and ultimately in treatment.
Yeah, and it's a common theme, unfortunately.
Right, because you go to the doctor and the doctor is trained to see the things that are most common.
Exactly.
And so if it's something rare, it's harder to pick up on.
And Jenny Riddell Carpenter, she actually added another really important point to this discussion, which is that women from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds are even more likely to have their health concerns dismissed.
Right.
So there's this added layer of inequality,
right,
which can make it even harder
to
get that timely diagnosis.
So not only do we need greater awareness of these symptoms among the healthcare professionals, but we need to really make sure that we're addressing any biases that might be leading to these disparities in diagnosis and care.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the conversation shifted again, focusing on glioblastoma.
Yeah.
A rare and very aggressive cancer.
It's a devastating disease.
It is. And Dr. Arthur actually shared a personal connection to this, recounting the experience of his father-in-law, Ivor Hutchison, who died from glioblastoma at 8 months after his first symptoms.
That's incredibly fast.
It is. And he brought up that, only 25% of patients actually live beyond 12 months post-diagnosis.
Right. And 5-year survival rate is even lower.
It's very low. And despite these statistics, the drugs that are used to treat it haven't actually changed that much in decades.
Right, which is in stark contrast to other cancers where there have been huge leaps and bounds.
Exactly. So it really is this lack of options and just this feeling of hopelessness.
Yeah. And Monica Harding, she also shared her own family's experiences with glioblastoma, which were incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
She talked about her brother-in-law's diagnosis and the loss of her husband's best friend and his sister, both to glioblastoma.
It's hard to even imagine.
It is.
And she really emphasized how slow the progress has been.
Yeah.
Compared to other cancers. And she mentioned that brain tumors, including glioblastoma, they only receive like a tiny amount of UK cancer funding.
Something like 1% to 2%.
1% to 2%.
Specifically for glioblastoma research.
I mean, that's appalling.
It's shocking, especially when you think about the the severity of the disease.
Mm.
And she also brought up concerns about, the government had actually pledged to double funding for brain tumor research a few years ago.
Right.
But she cited reports that said that a lot of that money still hasn't actually been allocated or
Wow.
spent.
So it's like empty promises.
Yeah, it makes you really question, the efficiency and the accountability
Mhm.
of these research funding process.
It does. It does.
And it also begs the question, are we really targeting the areas where the need is the greatest?
Yeah, I mean that's a really important question.
It is.
And now we're going to talk about another key element of this bill, which is, the pharmaceutical companies and those regulations surrounding orphan drugs.
Right, right.
So maybe we can start by just kind of quickly explaining to our listeners what are orphan drug regulations?
Sure. So basically, orphan drug regulations are a set of special rules and incentives that governments put in place to encourage pharmaceutical companies to develop medications for rare diseases
Okay.
because it's often not very profitable for them
Right.
because the patient populations are small.
Yeah, so it makes sense. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
how do we make this attractive for companies
Exactly.
to actually do this work?
Exactly. So they might offer things like extended periods of market exclusivity
Right.
or tax breaks to make it more financially viable.
Okay.
And this rare cancers bill is looking at how these regulations could be updated or reformed to provide even stronger incentives
Okay.
to invest in clinical trials and drug development for rare cancers, and also to explore the repurposing of existing drugs, which we talked about with Kira's case.
Okay.
So it's really about leveling the playing field
Right, right.
and making sure that these patients aren't being left behind.
And Sir Christopher Chope, he brought up another important point. He
Yeah.
was talking about the bill's geographical scope.
Right. So he noticed that clauses 2 and 3 of the bill, they're specifically applicable to England and Wales.
Right.
So it raises questions about, what about Scotland? Or about Northern Ireland?
Yeah, are they being addressed in the same way?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Dr. Arthur acknowledged the complexities of devolution,
Right.
but he did express his hope for collaborative efforts across the UK.
Yeah.
So, hopefully there'll be some joined up thinking on this issue.
Yeah, let's hope so. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. What are the concrete actions that this bill is proposing?
Okay, so first off, it's going to place a formal duty on the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care
Right.
to actively promote research into rare cancers.
Okay.
So this is basically saying that it's a priority.
Yeah, so it's not just talk.
It
It's
is.
like, okay, we're actually going to mandate this.
It's a legal obligation.
Okay, that's good.
Second, it's proposing a national specialty lead for rare cancers within the NIHR,
Right.
the National Institute for Health and Care Research.
Right.
So that would be an expert overlooking everything,
Right. Yeah.
making sure that research efforts are coordinated
Okay.
and we're actually moving in the right direction.
So it's like a champion, right?
Exactly.
Someone to really spearhead this.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Okay, third, improving access to clinical trials.
Okay.
They want to develop a service specifically tailored for these patients.
Okay.
It'll be integrated into the existing Be Part of Research registry.
Oh, okay.
So it's about making it easier for patients and doctors to find suitable research opportunities.
Right.
Because we know that's a huge barrier at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, keep going. This is good.
Okay. So fourth point, they want a national database of individuals who are willing to participate in clinical trials for rare cancers.
Yeah.
So that streamlines the whole recruitment process.
Yeah,
Which can be so difficult for these smaller patient populations.
makes sense.
And then finally, as we mentioned, there's going to be that government review of the orphan drug regulations
Right.
to
Yeah.
see how we can make those incentives even stronger.
Okay, so it really sounds like this is a multi-pronged approach.
It is.
It's trying to tackle this problem from all sides, which is great.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to see.
And it was really great to see such strong cross-party support.
It was incredible. I mean, you had MPs from across the political spectrum,
Yeah.
all sharing their personal stories,
Yeah.
their constituents' experiences.
Like Mike Wood, the conservative MP,
Yeah.
who shared the story of his friend Dan, who has faced multiple brain tumors.
Right.
And his symptoms were also misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
And Josh Fenton Glynn, a Labor MP.
He talked about the loss of his brother
Yeah.
to a rare salivary gland cancer.
Yeah, and really emphasized the need for more time.
Exactly. More time for families, more time for research.
Yeah.
It was a really powerful moment.
It was. And Clive Jones, a liberal Democrat MP, he shared his own experience
Yeah.
with male breast cancer. and the unique challenges of research for these smaller patient populations.
Right. And he suggested more international collaboration on clinical trials,
Right. Right.
which is an interesting idea.
And Lorraine Beavers,
Yeah.
she's a Labor MP.
She talked about immunotherapy.
Yeah, and the impact that had on her father's terminal cancer,
Right.
and really highlighted this need for greater access to these kinds of treatment.
Yeah, through clinical trials.
Right, right.
So, it's clear that this is an issue that goes beyond politics.
Yeah.
It's about humanity. It's about doing the right thing.
It's about compassion. It's about caring for everyone
Exactly.
and making sure that everybody has a fighting chance.
Absolutely.
And what was really encouraging was that not only were, backbench MPs expressing support, but we saw the government
Yeah.
and the shadow government
Yeah.
indicating their support.
So Ashley Dalton, the Parliamentary Undersecretary of State for Health and Social Care, she confirmed the government's backing.
And Edward Argar.
The Shadow Secretary of State for Health and Social Care.
Right.
He also confirmed the opposition's support.
So this bill really has a chance.
It does. It does.
It could actually become law.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it means that all of these personal stories, this discussion, it's not just talk.
Yeah, it's not just words.
It's going to hopefully translate into real action.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is what these patients and their families desperately need.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows how powerful parliamentary debates can be.
They can really bring those crucial issues.
Right, the ones that are often overlooked.
Yeah.
To the forefront.
And it's driven by these personal experiences.
Right, the human stories.
Yeah.
And this commitment to building a fairer and more equitable healthcare system.
And that's what we all want, right?
That's what we all want.
A system that works for everyone.
And this bill, while the fight is far from over,
right.
This is a really significant step forward.
It is. It's a beacon of hope.
It is. It is. So please subscribe to the Bench Report so you don't miss a topic that's important to you. Because at the end of the day, politics is everyone's business.
It affects us all.
It does. It does. Take care.